The Pyramid of Chichen Itza. What does it have to do with the humanities? Well, a great deal. This is the testimony of a very advanced civilization in Central America, the Mayas. The Mayas flourished particularly between the 7th and the 9th centuries, and then mysteriously their state cities were abandoned. These kingdoms disappeared, although the Mayan people didn't. Another very important civilization, the Aztecs, was still in full array when Cortés arrived in 1519 to the Americas. And in the southern part of the continent, another wonderful civilization, the Incas, that occupied most of the Andean mountain chain. As we can see in Machu Picchu, the legendary city that was only found by Europeans, actually by a US explorer, Hiram Bingham, in 1911, but was already known by the Indians of the area. What do these wonderful civilizations, pre-Hispanic civilizations, have to do with the development of humanism? Well, in great deal, from the Americas, the Spaniards and the Portuguese took thousands of tons of gold that nurtured the early modern capitalism. But at the same time, the exposure to different cultures, the reflection on other mythologies, other forms of social organization, both amazed and horrified the Europeans. Humanists stopped looking at themselves and start to look at others at the same time. A new world, literally, with thousands of languages, of which today only 600 survive, to speak only about Latin America. So this contact with the Amerindian cultures was part of the process of European expansion that included not only geographical, economic, material expansion and exchange, but also spiritual, cultural exchange that began what historian John Coatsworth has called the first cycle of globalization of the Americas, the European invasion. There is a second cycle, which is probably as painful as the other one, was the expansion to Asia. As we can see in the map, what the Spaniards achieved in Mexico after conquering Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, in 1521, was explore the Pacific. In this way, they fulfilled the dream of Columbus to reach Asia navigating to the west. And they created the Armada of Manila, departing from the port of Acapulco to Manila, precisely. The archipelago was baptized after Prince Philip, and that is the origin of the name Philippines, bringing goods and people from Asia to the Americas and sometimes to Europe. But there was another form of expansion that is signaled in the map by the blue lines, the slave trade. It was not only the Americas who suffered with the European process of colonization, also the African people, and obviously the martyrs of Japan, the Jesuits that had to sacrifice their life trying to preach to Japanese and Chinese princes the Gospels. In Africa, nonetheless, the kidnap of around 9 million people, 9 million individuals that were brought by force as slaves to work in the fields of the New World, was a painful chapter of human history, not only in Latin America, also in North America and in some parts of Europe. Why not? This is the second cycle of globalization, the massive migration of Africans into the Americas, and more contemporarily, a third cycle of globalization, the late 19th century and early 20th century, with immigration of more Asians, particularly from China and Japan, into the Americas, and more Europeans, Italians, Irish, Spaniards again. The story of migrations is in great part the story of the humanism, of the expanded movement of the Renaissance to explore new territories and new cultures, but in many cases due to the need to improve the life of those who migrated voluntarily. Those who migrated involuntarily obviously would not benefit from that migration. On the contrary, they would be exploited and mistreated, which would lead to the creation of what is called in many of the third world countries the internal colonialism, which is the darker side of the Renaissance, as scholar Walter Mignolo has put it. The fourth cycle of globalization in the Americas is the migration of Latin Americans into other parts of the world, mainly to the North Hemisphere cities and countries that actually hold the benefits of the initial expansion of Europe in the 16th century. So we can understand current processes, contemporary problems, issues of identity, migration, identity politics, racism, if we go back to the 15th and the 16th centuries. The Renaissance is not deprived of many of these problems. On the contrary, it foresees what is going to happen in centuries later after the contact, the unequal contact between cultures, civilizations, and political powers.